Welcome to my plant shelf where I house all of my plant experiments as well as plants I plan on giving out to plant friends. A little walk through all of the plants. Over here I've got succulents and my variegated Rhaphidophora tetraspermas. In that back corner I've got some string of whatevers, as well as here string of whatevers and seed experiments. On this shelf I've got my zebra plants, some succulents, as well as some pothos. Down here I've got my philodendron white knight, as well as citronella and string of coins. In that back corner I've got my fertilizer experiments. In that one down there I've got some taller plants like my variegated monsteras. And then on these two shelves I've got succulents, string of bananas, and just a bunch of failed experiments. The reason I had to redo my plant shelf is because the water from down here had messed with my smart plug and had ruined my plant shelf, so I actually had to move it up to there. So my goal was to try to move all of the plants around, that way the plug doesn't get wet anymore, and also hopefully to fix the shelf. On top of the shelf, I've got the painting that I fixed earlier, some coconut experiments, and then just a bunch of plant supplies that are just thrown in here and are definitely not pleasing to the eye. So with that, let's start to clean. Now, the worst part about cleaning is removing all of the plants, so I went ahead and just started by removing every single one individually to just double check that A, they were alive, and B, they didn't have any pests or any situations that needed to be addressed. Hence the sniffing and just walking through each one of these very slowly. I did double check everything, and most of the ones in that top left shelf definitely needed to be addressed. I mean, that cutting has been in water for months and hasn't rooted, so immediately gone. Some of those succulents were a little dry and things like that I just noted, and I organized all of the plants on the floor based on what needed to be addressed. I'm also removing all of the aluminum liners just because I want to make sure that I completely clean everything. So I was going to rinse off the liners as well as all of the shelves, which I will do in a bit. I'm also picking out all of those fungus gnat traps because I've had them in there for probably years, because they only have a few flies on them, and I'm always like, oh, they'll catch some just in case, whatever, and I keep them and they're so ugly, and the flies on there are probably so moldy. I also really was trying to show you guys all of the plants and the discoveries I was making, but I hadn't realized that, not turning on the light in the room would probably make the camera not pick up anything. But I was trying to show you all of the succulent leaves I was finding, as well as how proud I was of some of these succulents, because I grew all of these from leaf cuttings. And just like you heard from my bad singing, I called this plant evil because this one right here is a bunny ear cactus, and the prickles on this are so evil. They're like semi-invisible, so if they touch you, good luck finding them and trying to get them out of your hands. This one is definitely elongated and has been for the whole time I've had it. It has never grown normally. I should just toss it out, but for some reason I can't get rid of plants. I found a lot more succulent cuttings as well as some disgusting dead bugs like centipedes, but eventually I cleaned up the shelf, so let's address what I've got. Starting off with the good stuff, we've got all of the crusty cuttings that are no longer with us, as well as that evil bunny ear cactus. You can see when I screamed it was because it flipped over and almost touched my hand, but the rest of these are looking good. There are a lot of them, and I mean, this is only half of them, but I definitely need to get to the shelf and start to clean it up. I thought removing the plants was the worst part, but I think cleaning up all of the diatomaceous earth and the dead bugs was, but I went ahead and was like, you know what, let's get to it, and then this happened. Yeah, I accidentally stepped on that really long succulent that I was really proud of. Yeah, thankfully I only stepped on a few of the leaves, but I felt so bad because I treat these like my little babies, but I got over it, and then I went in and started to clean the shelves using a Swedish dishcloth. That is such a tongue twister. Anyways, I used that cloth to just wipe down all of the glass, all of the wooden shelves that I used to heighten the plants closer up to the grow lights. I just went ahead and cleaned literally everything, including the walls, the baseboards. Everything that could be coated in any sort of anything plant related was wiped down. Also, I don't think I learned my lesson the first time, but I stepped over these plants like 12 times. Editing this was so stressful because I was like, am I about to step on another plant? One plant casualty was more than enough. I don't know why I was willing to risk another one. I also found this variegated monstera leaf and it had fallen off of its plant, so I was like, let me put it to the side and then press it and put it in some plant art. After everything had been organized, I went ahead and started adding those plant trays back. back, and then I realized some of the grow lights had fallen while I was removing the plants, so I went ahead and adjusted those to just make sure that they were all supported and properly situated. These aluminum trays are used to bottom water, but also just to make sure that no water gets on the plugs and also on the floor. I'm trying to minimize the mess, although it was very messy. I don't know how well of a job they're doing. Everything is now good to go, and so it's time to add all of the plants. I do try to organize them when I do these plant makeovers. However, they do end up getting very messy within a couple of months. I just exchange and move plants around way too much for me to have some sort of plan, but I do try to keep all of the succulents together, all of the plant experiments in the top left, and today I've decided all of the zebra plants need to go with each other. I do all of this based off of the plant care needs. So the zebra plants are technically succulents, but I feel like they take in and need a lot more water than a normal succulent, which is why I'm putting them all together. As I'm going through this, I am also debating which plants I don't want or want to give away, and that one was very close to being one, but I decided, you know what, I've kept it for this long, let me keep it. And this one right here is the one I accidentally stepped on. I wanted to just double check, and thankfully it was just a few of those middle leaves. It was not the branch or the stem at all. So I went ahead and just placed it back onto the shelf. And after that, I just went through, again, I am organizing based off the plant care needs. My priority is watering. I try to put all of the plants with similar watering needs next to each other. That way I'm not putting a succulent next to something that needs weekly waterings and then watering based off of one and not the other, and then impacting the other plant. Along with that, I also take into consideration the plant height. So you saw I have a bunch of like wooden platforms for some of these to just bring the plants up closer. Some of the wooden platforms are shorter, some are taller. That bottom right cabinet has the glass pane removed for my taller plants. So I really organize them based off of how close they need to be to the grow light. I definitely have some that are a little too close to the grow light, but thankfully these ones don't seem to burn the plants. But you can also see that Monstera albo is way too tall for this plant shelf, but I just don't have space for it anywhere else. Thankfully, the grow lights are bright enough that it does get enough sun even when it's not directly under them. But that is all of the plants organized. Here's a little walkthrough of how they have been reorganized. You can see all of the plant experiments, the string of whatevers are on the left. Over here, we've got my succulents and my pothos. Down here, again, more succulents, all of those zebra plants. In that back corner, I think is just more succulents. Yep. Getting a closer look. We are doing this real time, people. Over here, I've got some more bananas, some other Rhaphidophora tetraspermas. Down here, I've got all of my leca and my citronella string of coins. Back there is still the pothos fertilizer experiment, and right here are my taller plants. These plants have been through a lot today, and so to reward them, I've decided to give them a little treat, which is some fertilizer. I just use whatever fertilizer I have on hand. I've got a ton of them from that fertilizer experiment, and right now I am using the Fox Farm one, which is the one that won the experiment. With the plants fertilized and all set, let's move to the top of the shelf. I'm going to start with a disclaimer of why I didn't turn on the light. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I wasn't like, oh, I'm filming, let me turn on, at least a filming light or, the room light. But I guess this just goes to show how bright those grow lights are. When the grow lights are on, I never turn on the room lights. And this is in the basement, so those are bright. But I started off by just moving all of my propagation stations. I've got like random plastic ones, some glass ones. I just went ahead and moved all of those out of the way. I've also got some new hydrogen peroxide and it's a little bit of the old one. So I was like, you know what, let me combine them. And I'm an idiot because obviously the new one would be completely full, but I went ahead and did what I could. I'm just going to use that hydrogen peroxide for a different experiment anyways. I just kept finding more and more propagation stations. So I went ahead and removed those. In that back basket, I've got my diatomaceous earth, my perlite, my coconut husk. All of those supplies are in containers in there, so I want to keep them all stocked and organized. I then went ahead and cleaned the shelf, and that's when I found that the hydrogen peroxide had dropped on something and was bubbling. And I was like, is that blood? And then I realized, no, it was just some of the fertilizer. It had just mixed with drips that had come out of that watering can, and it was the most foul thing. It looked like baby poo. I got over it, I wiped it down, but I went ahead and wiped the remaining of the shelf since somehow diatomaceous earth also got up on that top shelf. But after wiping everything down, this is what it is looking like up here, and this is what the plants are looking like with the shelf as well. As to how long this lasts, I give it a month, maybe a week. I've been highlighting the successes for all this time, but I thought I would go through the losses. I've got a Monstera alba cutting that rotted, but also a bunch of string of banana plants that I just did not water enough. These guys were all sitting in the back of the shelf and I did not see them, which is why it is very important to continue to check in and clean up my plant shelf.